Hi there, Mark here again, and for the next few weeks we're going to be focusing our attention in on our short game as we begin to add the next critical fundamental skill to our toolbox, which is our ability to control the bottom of our arc, or that low point in your golf swing where your club makes contact with the ground relative to the ball position. A critical skill in becoming a consistent striker of the golf ball and therefore golfer. And to help us with this, we're going to be looking at our chipping first. That little low lofted shot that we play from around the green with typically a 7, 8, or 9 iron when we really don't need to create a lofted shot to go over anything. To help us with this, you don't necessarily need to go out and invest in a hitting mat like I have here, but I would suggest, just to save some wear and tear on your floors and carpeting, to grab a welcome mat like I have here that has a tight enough and thick enough weave that you could stick a tee in it and hold it up. This way we can mimic the turf conditions that we have in our fringes and fairways at the club that'll help us give a little more realistic feel to what it is we're trying to do. In addition, while you're there, I would grab a couple packages of those fake foam yellow golf balls. They really do fly the same way trajectory-wise that we would see depending on the club we're using, but if you lose control over one, you're not going to break anything or hurt anybody. So now that we have sort of the basic practice area set up, I want you to go ahead and grab your 7 iron and let's get to work. So knowing that many of us struggle with these delicate little lofted shots around the green, I think we need to establish what it is that we are doing incorrectly that leads to these struggles. And usually it stems from the incorrect concept that it is our job or responsibility to make the golf ball go in the air. To ask you a silly question, just to back up a little bit, when you're on the putting green, have you ever thought about trying to lift the ball in the air? And I would hope that the resounding answer to that question would be no. For the simple fact that we understand the concept. We have a flat-faced club that we run into the ball, and the result is the ball rolls along the green. If you remember during our putting video, I talked about the difference between being task-oriented and result-oriented. Well, with chipping and pitching, we now have a tool that has been bent at the factory and designed to, based on the same concept of running the loft into the golf ball, just like putting. Now the result is the ball goes in the air. Yet we put this set of instructions into our computer, our mind, that says, hit ball in the air, Mark. And because of our really amazing machines that we have up here, if you put in that set of instructions, your body is going to go about trying to make that motion occur, make the result occur, which shows up generally in a lot of overactive hands trying to lift or scoop the golf ball. A lot of times we end up hitting the ground behind it, and chunking it, or missing the ground altogether and blading it. Again, based on that set of instructions, we see a lot of excessive body action, either leaning back, trying to create an angle to swing up on it, which usually either results in even hitting further behind the golf ball, or creating the need, in an attempt to avoid hitting the ground, to lift the club off the ground, creating that chicken wing. Down the line, again, we see a lot of lifting action in knees or chest. So all these movements are based on incorrect concept and then a set of instructions that follow. So what we need to do is first understand what the bottom of the arc actually is and how these motions affect it. And then we need to paint a little better picture in your mind of what it is we're trying to do. So one, to establish what the bottom of your arc is. So I've got my hula hoop. This yellow piece of tape is the low point or the bottom of our arc. And if you picture a swing set for a second, directly below the bar where the kid's feet hit the ground and create that little ditch or divot, that is directly below and therefore the bottom of the arc. So for us, if I'm just swinging one arm, the bottom of my arc would be directly below my shoulder. But with our hands together, that moves the center of my swing directly underneath my sternum or underneath my chin. So the bottom of my arc, generally speaking, is directly underneath my chin. So if you're looking at just the wrists first, if my wrists start to go back and forth, you can see how much the bottom of my arc is moved just based on my hand action. If my hands and arms were the chain of the swing, if I have any sort of lifting motion, again, now I'm lifting the bottom of my arc off the ground. Well, the ball is on the ground, so the bottom of the arc needs to relate to the ball. If we're looking at body position, if my body was the frame of the swing set, if I lean back, that actually moves the bottom of my arc off of the ground and way forward from the golf ball. Well, the ball doesn't know it's supposed to roll out there, so it just sits there. Now I have to manipulate my hands and wrists. So you can see we have a recipe for a lot of inconsistency. So that idea of lifting gives us all these problems. So we need to paint a different picture in your mind. And to help us with that, we're going to grab a broom. And without even trying, I think most of you are almost experts in this task. Dirt's on the ground. That's the ball. Our job is to collect the dirt and move it or direct it over into a space where we can get rid of it at a later time. So if we're looking at this concept, the first thing is to complete the task, the bristles need to stay on the ground. So we usually don't see a lot of random or active hand action. For one, we lose control over the dirt, and we're going to push it all over the place, which is just going to make this job that much more difficult. Okay? Two, you don't see arms lifting off of the ground, because again, defeats the purpose of the task if the tool isn't on the ground. We don't generally see a lot of leaning back and lifting, okay? And we don't see a lot of twisting of the broom either. We want to direct it, lean that plane towards, and move it along the ground. So really your hands and arms become more of a stabilizer to the tool. As you're doing it, it's a lot more body pivot or rotation. And usually as you get to the end of the stroke, you would have more of your weight on your forward leg and your body would have rotated slightly. So this is a pretty in-depth look into what it is to sweep, but it's important to be able to establish this idea here of what it is we're trying to do. So when we're looking at chipping, pitching, even our full swing for that matter, there's a lot more sweep through the hitting area than lift. So if we can plant that new task in our mind, we're going to be in a much better spot. So when we're applying the same idea, when I was hanging on to this, you can see in my stabilizing, and in order to make sure the blades or the bristles of the brush stay on the ground, I kind of lean the handle forward and be able to apply a little bit of force against the ground, okay? That way when I hit the ground, I can still direct it. So when we're looking at your setup, you're going to have the handle or the shaft of the club lean forward to mimic the sweeping action. We're going to, again, stabilize the club and club head with our hands and arms. There's not going to be a lot of twisting of the face and hand action, okay? We're going to have this feeling of brushing or sweeping. We're going to have some body pivot. My arms and hands are directed through the motion with my body pivot. And when I'm done, I'm going to see that I have a little more weight on my front leg and I may have rotated slightly. All with the thought in mind of the task of hitting the ground. Now it's important to establish that once we move off of the green and the grass starts to get longer, that golf ball is heavy enough, and with gravity it actually is pushed down below the general surface of the grass. So that's why it's so important for us not only to just brush the very tippy tops, but actually to get into the grass. Now not down into it, but we want to establish that that club is down into the turf, so that the bottom of my club head is even with the bottom of the ball. Therefore, I'm going to run the loft into the ball. Now, when I was looking just a second ago how leaning back lifts the arc off the ground, leaning forward slightly is going to ensure that we stay along the ground. So with a chip and pitch shot, and really when we're looking at full swing impact, we're going to have just this little bit more motion, a little bit left, to be able to ensure the club is going towards the ground. That way we don't have to manipulate it with our hands. So there's the motion, okay? There's the picture, there's the task, okay? So to help us with that, I've got a little, you can use anything you want, but this is a little cutting board, and I happen to cut out a space that's just wider than my club head. Imagine the two sleeves of golf balls from our putting lesson. So this is going to help us with, again, center contact and square contact. Square contact from the fact that I'm not really excessively twisting the broom head nor the club. Idea here is I need to direct contact with the ground in that space that I've created. If I get handsy, I'm going to hit that back piece early. If I lean back, trying to get underneath it, again, I'm going to hit back here, which you can see I actually did. So once we have that down, again, we're going to direct this into a spot that's about an inch, inch and a half forward of that back piece. And when that club hits the ground, it's actually on the ground for probably about the space, width, and length of, say, a business card. So if you can imagine that, again, slightly narrow stance, we're leaning a little bit left, hands and arms stabilize, body rotation guides the arms through there. Once we're comfortable with that, we apply golf ball and do the same thing. Okay? We control the bottom of our arc. So now where that club hits the ground, that's going to be right where the ball is. So the second my club hits the ground, the ball is hitting the face. Those two collisions are happening simultaneously. I'm controlling the bottom of my arc, therefore I'm controlling impact. Putting the three fundamental skills of center contact, square contact, and controlling the bottom of our arc is critical to our success in every shot that we play when the ball is on the ground. So that's, again, why it's so important to really work on these skills with these shorter, slower swings first, and then we can always establish speed and length afterwards. One last thing, I have a alignment stick resting on these two baskets. With a 7-iron and a chip shot, this is not a high lofted shot. So this could be anything, have it be roughly a foot off the ground, so that once you're comfortable with the motion, we want to be able to picture what it looks like. So this is going to land short of the stick, but it's going to go underneath it. That's the big thing. So it could be a chair, something that you can go underneath it, okay? So once we've established that and know what the look and feel is like, then it's going to be a lot easier for us then to move on to next week's topic, which is going to be pitching. And if I simply take more loft and add it to the exact same set of stuff that we just worked on, just the simple addition of 30 more degrees aloft, when I make this swing, that ball went up in the air. So again, the loft choice, or the loft of the club in general, is what's responsible for creating the height. Our task is to direct the bottom of our arc to the ground and then be able to apply that to the golf ball. So with a clear idea and concept of what we're doing, I think we're going to be ready to move on to the next one. So work hard with these ideas, have fun, stay warm, and I'll see you next time.